Today, we're going to talk about how to identify your family patterns. So I want us to take a lens, right? Have the lens of looking at a family tree. And you start looking at your parents. And when you think about your parents, I want you to start thinking about their work ethic, their platonic and intimate relationships, how they dance with money, what's their mindset about religion, marriage, what do they think about these topics that influences our lives. And then you start thinking about that from your parent level, right? From your parents. And then if you know your grandparents or if your parents are still alive, then you start really asking those questions about what's the mindset about the grandparents and where did it change or where did it stay the same? And so as you start identifying family patterns, then you start realizing that free will is not really free. It's that your parents, your previous generations really get to determine and predict your life more than you realize. And when you start doing healing and being an observer instead of a participant, then you get to really start making a choice of how you want to live. And the family system really influences your day-to-day. It influences your mental health, your physical health, and the choices that you decide to choose because you were influenced the moment you got on this planet. And so one of the things you can really start thinking about is that the examples. So I'll give you an example. So if you come from a family where all the women or the majority have been married and then they're divorced, and the person that they were married to may have been an alcoholic or an addict, right? There is something there that's not being identified, that's not being talked about, but there's a theme. And so if you go back one other generation from that, where the women have married and now they're divorced, then you really look at what's the previous generation. How were the women in their marriages? Were they married? Were there divorces? Were there infidelity? And you need to just start figuring out what are some of the themes. So I come from a family, and my extended family, a lot of people are married. There's one great uncle and great aunt. They have passed away that weren't married. Everybody else was married. And so when I think about that, I think that there is something within marriage that doesn't necessarily have to be healthy, but there's something in marriage that everybody in my family decided to follow that theme. It might not be healthy, but that is the way to go. And it's not saying that marriage is unhealthy, but if you're constantly seeing that in your family system, then you may feel obligated to get married even when you don't want to. So when you start thinking about those themes, then you start recognizing, is this something you want to do, or is this something that you feel inclined to do because your family system has already been doing it for years and generations upon generations? So just think about that. And then something you start thinking about is your parents and then yourself. And when you think about your characteristics and how you're showing up, do you cause friction in your family because you're doing something different? And that usually happens when you're going against your family system and there's guilt and shame. So something I want you to do, your call to action, is a comic strip or drawing. I want you to really kind of draw out a comic strip of two generations of things that they may do. And you might be like, a comic strip, it's fine. But when we start drawing and we start really getting into creating that way, your body actually gives you more answers than you realize. So get a comic strip or a piece of paper, and I just want you to draw out two themes that involves two generations. So if I think about a theme in my generation and the generation behind me, and probably the generation behind me, so I can think about 4 generations: my generation, my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. And on my dad's side and my mother's side, they are workaholics. So I have easily worked 60, 70 hours a week, And then I know my parents have easily worked 60, 70 hours a week, and my father at times worked 80. And then behind that, they've worked that way. If I go back to the fourth generation in that, the fourth generation were freed slaves. So now I can sit here and tell you that that mindset of working is coming from slavery and coming from the mindset of, I gotta do a certain thing for master, right? I gotta, to be the best slave, to be the best person, I gotta work hard. And so I know for me, I realize that my identity is not in my work, that I am enough without my work. I don't have to work 70 hours. And once I made that shift, life was different. I got to live. I was not in survival mode, but when I started making that shift, there was some friction. So going back to your call of action, I want you to create a theme that has been reoccurring in your life, in your family. And so you can start really witnessing and you can start getting the answers to some of the questions that you're like, why do I do this? What is this? And this is how we can start agitating and understanding the things that you do and the things that you want to accomplish and what and why these things are often getting in your way from living the best life. Check out the next episode next Friday. Be well, be amazing, and most of all, be you.